I heard the Vikings had trade parameters worked out with an AFC team for a Dalvin Cook trade after June 1st, but I think that there's already an idea there that we will not have Dalvin Cook on the roster next year.
The Miami Dolphins are about to make a huge trade, trying to get their 4th star via trade in the past year, this time a star running back from Minnesota. The Dolphins have been the newest team using that Rams approach of F them picks and truly going all in for the Super Bowl window the next couple of years. It all started last offseason when they traded for one of the best wide receivers in football, Tyreek Hill from the Kansas City Chiefs, giving up multiple draft picks and paying him over $100 million to come to South Florida. And in my opinion, I think it worked out pretty nicely. Tyreek Hill had the best statistical season of his career, and he completely changed the Dolphins team, their organization, and even improved their quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa. But Tyreek Hill would not be the last star that the Miami Dolphins would trade for last year, as in the middle of the season during the trade deadline, they acquired pass rusher Bradley Chubb from the Denver Broncos for a first-round pick and Chase Edmonds. And now on that defensive line, they pair Chubb and Jalen Phillips together, and that's one of the scariest pass rushing duos that we have in the NFL. But those were just the massive trades that the Dolphins made last season. This offseason, you can argue that this was the biggest trade yet when the Dolphins sent Hunter Long and a 3rd-round pick for all-pro cornerback Jalen Ramsey. With the Rams now entering a rebuild and Jalen Ramsey still making a ton of money on his contract, it made sense for them to cut ties with him, do right by Jalen Ramsey, trade him to where he wanted to go, and that was Miami. But just in the past year, the Dolphins have made 3 blockbuster trades in acquiring Bradley Chubb, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Ramsey, and it seems like they're trying to acquire one more key piece. That, of course, would be Dalvin Cook from the Minnesota Vikings, and there's been a ton of rumors circulating about the Dolphins and Cook since the beginning of free agency. I found a very interesting article on the Vikings territory that really broke down the entire situation. It stated in the article that the Cook rumor mill began prominent about a week before free agency kicked off on March 13th. He was plopped onto the Miami Dolphins roster as a possible trade candidate, a reasonable fit as Miami is his hometown, but then nothing happened on the trade front, and the Dolphins re-signed a bunch of their 2022 tailbacks and drafted one last weekend. The article went on and even quoted the Vikings general manager Adolfo Mensa, and he said conversations are always ongoing with him. We're trying to be solution oriented, always trying to put the roster together with our constraints, and they mentioned at the end of the quote that those sound like comments regarding a player who's about to depart. But this article is not the only thing that is continuing to mention Dalvin Cook to the Dolphins. Albert Breer, a very well-known NFL insider, he even came out with a tweet in an article saying Dalvin Cook and Zadarius Smith are both on the trade market and the Vikings are open to trading them. And then a writer for the Pioneer Press known as Charlie Walters came out and said the Dalvin Cook trade, probably due to his hometown Miami Dolphins, could occur anytime, even this summer. The best the Vikings can expect for Cook, who turns 28 just before the season, is a 5th-round pick. He said the problem for the Vikings is Cook's $11 million salary for next season. The Dolphins also figure he isn't worth that much, so why give up much when they know that the Vikings aren't going to pay him that much? If the trade can't work, the Vikings might just have to release him. And then what really put the cherry on top for me was that Dalvin Cook's agent, Zach Heiler, he went on a Viking-centric podcast, I believe called Caps Off, and he was directly asked about Dalvin Cook to Miami, and he was pretty shook by the question, which in my opinion kind of echoes all of the reports.
So the Dolphins didn't inquire.
So I mean, listen. I mean, the media is always off on the drafts, but the media is not always off on, I would say, the actual team news.
So all of these reports happened this past week, and shortly after all of them, Dalvin Cook had very interesting timing on his Instagram, posting a picture of himself at the NFL Pro Bowl on his Instagram story with the cool emoji covering the Vikings logo on his jersey. Could his post just be a massive coincidence, or is he kind of hinting towards all of the reports somewhat being true? But that is the Dalvin Cook and Viking side of things. The Dolphins side of things, in my opinion, is also very interesting. As I already mentioned in one of the articles, the Dolphins brought back all of their running backs from a season ago. They re-signed Raheem Mostert, they re-signed Jeff Wilson, they even brought back their 3rd-string running back in Savon Ahmed, and their top 2 leading rushers from last year, Mostert and Wilson, signed 2-year contracts. So I thought the Dolphins were just going to run it back with the running back crew from last season and see how it goes this year. But my thought process was completely messed up when the Dolphins used a premium pick on another running back in the NFL draft, Devon Achane from Texas A&M. The Dolphins drafted him in the 3rd round, and Mike McDaniel seems to be a very, very big fan of him, and he's going to be able to utilize him in some very nice ways in his offense. So personally, when the Dolphins made this selection, I thought the Dalvin Cook to Miami rumors were basically dead at this point, but Mike McDaniel and GM Chris Grier would have some very interesting comments in the post-draft press conference.
There was some talk about you guys being interested in a veteran running back. Is that window still open, or does A-Chain kind of take that off the table?
All right, generally, nothing's off the table. Yes.
So it seems like, according to their own words, the Dolphins still have a lot of interest in adding another veteran running back. Could they be hinting towards Ezekiel Elliott? Could they be hinting towards Leonard Fournette? Or could they be hinting towards the player that they've been rumored to acquire all offseason in Dalvin Cook? The last thing that I want to add that was super random and kind of funny to me was that Dalvin Cook was FaceTiming the Dolphins' second-round pick Cam Smith after the draft. Now, I don't think that has anything to do with the Dolphins, but I do think it's kind of funny that the Dolphins' highest draft pick in this year's draft class has some sort of connection to Dalvin Cook, and a big enough connection where right after Cam Smith had the biggest moment of his life that he was FaceTiming Dalvin Cook and celebrating that moment with him. But nonetheless, I think things can get really interesting regarding the Miami Dolphins and Dalvin Cook, and I do ultimately think that a trade is going to get done. However, I do think we're going to have to wait probably another month for things to really work out. Currently, right now, the Dolphins only have $2 million in cap space, and they're waiting for the Byron Jones cap relief to hit on June 1st. Once we get to June 1st, the Dolphins will get around $13 million added to their cap space. So then at that point, the Dolphins will be able to afford a player like Dalvin Cook and be able to take on his contract. And even for the Minnesota Vikings, waiting until June 1st is the best move for the team. If the Vikings release Dalvin Cook before June 1st, the team will only save $5.9 million against the cap with an $8.2 million cap penalty. After June 1st, though, they get $9 million in cap relief and only have to pay a $5.1 million cap penalty for a trade, which I still think is the most likely scenario here. Sending Cook elsewhere before June 1st would save $7.8 million and fetch a mid to late round draft pick, but offloading Dalvin after June 1st via trade would save $11 million with only a $3.1 million penalty. So it's pretty clear that a trade after June 1st would be best suited for both of these teams, and I think that's when we're ultimately going to see a trade get done. But something I am interested in seeing is how much the Dolphins are willing to pay on Dalvin Cook's contract. As I mentioned before, he is going to be 28 years old before next season starts, and when you get into the upper 20s, early 30s as a running back, that's when you kind of see them depreciate a little bit. We've seen it in the recent years with Ezekiel Elliott and Leonard Fournette, also two other free agents on the open market right now. We can even go back a few years ago and talk about Le'Veon Bell. He's another player that kind of fits that criteria. So we have a lot of historical evidence that points to running backs getting up there in their 20s and even early 30s. They start to drop off a little bit. In every single metric for his contract, Dalvin Cook is in the top 5 for running backs in the NFL. He's got the 4th highest cap hit in the league. As far as total cash owed, he is 3rd in the league. His base salary is still 4th in the league with $10.4 million next season. So he's definitely not a cheap player. The Dolphins can't afford him though with the Byron Jones cap relief. But are they really wanting to spend all of that money on Dalvin Cook, an aging running back? I guess we're gonna have to wait and see how that goes. I don't really see that happening, but maybe that's the only way the trade gets done, or maybe they can compromise on the salary. I would also like to mention that Dalvin Cook is still, in my opinion, one of the best running backs in the league. He's no doubt a top 7, top 6 running back. He made his 4th straight Pro Bowl this past year. He had over 1,000 yards again for his 4th straight season. He's been on an absolute tear for the Vikings. There's also been some rumors that he's had a very bad shoulder injury for a couple seasons now that he hasn't really been able to get surgery on. He did get that surgery this offseason though, so he should be getting back towards 100%. Maybe that extends his prime a little bit. Maybe when he steps into a situation in Miami with multiple running backs where he doesn't have to carry the load, he can be still a very effective player. But let me know what you think about Dalvin Cook to Miami. Do you think that trade is going to happen? And do you think Dalvin Cook still has some left in the tank? Also, let me know if you were the Miami Dolphins, what you would trade to acquire Cook. But anyway, subscribe to the channel if you are new, like the video if you did enjoy it. And as always, thank you so much for watching the video, and I will catch you guys in my next one.